We want to welcome Jan Holden, who is the president of IANDS, the International Association for Near-Death Studies. Another wonderful conference, and we're very pleased that you would join us. You guys are the organization of record in this space. What is the state of the state in IANDS these days?
Well, as you know, Mark, the organization began in the early 1980s, and since then we've just been growing consistently, and to the point that now our conference this year is being attended by about 800 people, and our videos will be available for people to view on video on demand afterwards, which will increase the number of participants. And our membership is at just about 2,000. So the organization is growing and having more and more impact, which is exactly what we want.
Well, and certainly the near-death experience is the nexus point of the organization. However, you have some new exciting research that you've undertaken, and if you could enlighten our viewers about that, I'm sure they'll be interested in hearing about that.
Sure. Well, and yes, the mission of IANDS is to advance global understanding of near-death experiences and related experiences through research, education, and supportive communities. And the related experiences are mostly things that occur during NDEs, but also occur outside the context of NDEs. So they include things like after-death communication, which is meeting deceased loved ones, mystical experiences, which is encounters with higher beings that are typically all-knowing, all-loving, that sort of thing. Precognition, knowing the future. Reincarnation, people who remember previous lives. And so, because in NDEs, all those things happen. So the organization is really bigger than NDEs, but like you say, NDEs are the kind of crux of it. So back to after-death communication, that's the nature of our current study. A group of us headed at the University of Virginia are studying veridical after-death communication.
So define veridical really quickly.
Yeah. So in after-death communication, a living person has the sense of communication with a deceased person or entity. And veridical means that during the ADC, well, let me back up and say, most ADC is a personal experience of an encounter with a deceased entity in which the main messages are that the deceased person is well and whole and all good, that they still love the living person, they still know about the living person's life, and so and that someday they'll be reunited. And when the living person also passes over, they'll be reconnected. So it's all these positive messages, but they're just personal, just personal messages, right? Yeah. But what's interesting to us is that in order for people to really embrace these messages and realize the beneficial aspects of them, it helps if they accept the experiences as real. Now, they feel absolutely real,
right.
But from somebody who maybe hasn't had the experience, it can say, like, you what?
Right, it's too fantastical for them.
Yeah, too fantastical. Mm-hmm. But what's happened is that in some cases, the person having the ADC gets information through the experience that they couldn't have known in any normal way. And then after the ADC, the information they got was found to be correct. So, for example, a person might have an ADC with someone that they didn't think had died, and it's like to everything they know, that person's alive and healthy and living in Pasadena. And then they have the ADC. Usually it's for the dying person to come and say goodbye and kind of give a sense of I'm all good now.
Right,
and,
resolution.
Yeah, And then 15 minutes later, the person receives a phone call letting them know that this person had died about an hour ago. So at the time that they had the ADC, the person had just died.
So, for example, would it be something as simple as like I'm thinking of you, and we hadn't talked in years, and then you called me 5 minutes later, or
Yeah, exactly right. That kind of thing. So
But this involves death, though. That
this,
wouldn't have been death,
yes,
but
it involves death and a direct encounter with someone who
this is
has
transition.
just transitioned. Yeah. Another kind of veridical ADC is where the living person receives information about like something lost or hidden that turns out to be correct. And for example, there's a man whose father had confided to him that he'd hidden a gun in his house, and he said to the son, "If anything ever happens to me, please remove it from the house." And the son, after the father died a few years later, the son went over to the house, couldn't find the gun anywhere, but then had this experience while he was asleep that I don't call a dream because it is qualitatively different than dreams. It's much more real. And he's in the house. His father is telling him where he can find the gun, which is in this. The son had already searched the house, but the father had hidden the gun between the cabinet and the wall of his dark room. And so, and of course, who would look there? But after the dream, he went over to the house, pulled the cabinet away from the wall. There was the gun. People have gotten information about passcodes to telephones, where to find hidden documents like insurance policies,
Safe deposit boxes
and safe deposit
yeah.
boxes that weren't known to exist,
Yeah.
and that sort of thing. So any kind of information that a person receives during the ADC that they couldn't have known through any normal means, and then is later verified as correct. Now, the first phase of our study is for people to just come and answer our survey online. But one of the questions we're asking is, is there at least one other living person who could serve as a witness to this? So it's not just you telling the story about how you found the hidden insurance thing, but that when you went over to the house and you told your mother, "Dad told me that the insurance thing is hidden. If you open his top nightstand drawer and feel up under there, he taped it up there."
Right.
Would your mother be able to confirm with us that this happened? And so for the second phase of our study, we're going to be actually interviewing people where there is a witness so that we can actually investigate these cases, confirm their authenticity, and then hopefully compile these cases into a book.
Now, there have been tremendous leaders in this field for so long. Raymond Moody, Bruce Grayson, Kenneth Ring, Dr. Jeffrey Long. From a substantive point of view, that's documentation where a lot of people don't even permit themselves to consider these as being real unless someone who's an academician or clinician has verifiable information, hence your study. But how has it grown in your time in the organization? How have you seen not only the documentation evolve, but the stories evolve and reach a wider audience based on the World Wide Web?
Yeah, there has been a proliferation of these experiences being documented on film like on YouTube. It's hard to get on the internet, type in near-death experience, and not come up with a lot of people giving their testimonials.
Right.
And I think that just the sheer volume of people and that being able to listen to these people, look at them, see the sincerity, and
Right.
that they're not telling their story for any reason except to let humanity know what they now know about the first moments of death. and the implications for ongoing survival of consciousness after death, and what that means for our lives. So, the proliferation of these testimonials online, I think, is a really important development. And another one is that we've been able to capture numerous cases of veridical near-death experiences. So, in the near-death experience, the person learned something that was not capable for them to know just based on normal sensory means, even being able to infer something they couldn't have inferred, and then
Right.
it's later shown to be correct. Well, we've collected over 130 cases like this into a book called The Self Does Not Die.
It's a great book.
It is really a good book, and most of the witnesses are medical professionals, usually the physician who was attending during a medical crisis. And we know from research that's done on what are the most trusted professions. Physicians are always in the U.S. It's an annual analysis that they do. Physicians are always in the top 5.
They're revered, yes.
Yeah. So the fact that they're the witnesses confirming what actually happened and confirming the accuracy, and especially of things that are just that contradicted the experiencer's expectations, or just were nowhere in the realm of anything they could have imagined, that turns out to be accurate and correct. It's very affirming of the reality of the experience, and therefore then the credibility of the message that near-death experiencers bring back, which is that we're all here for a purpose. Our purpose is essentially to advance in our capacity to love, to use this earthly existence to advance in our capacity to love, to acquire knowledge, and that we make the most and enjoy life to the extent that we can. So to make the most of those missions.
Yeah.
And just imagine what a different world it would be if everyone, including political leaders who shall remain nameless, really understood and embraced that purpose of life.
Well, and you hit the nail right on the head. Dr. Jeff O'Driscoll, who's been a part of our ongoing pilgrimage in this space, has given veracity to a lot of personal accounts that he's seen in the operating room, most specifically with Jeff Olson, when Jeff's wife transitioned in the car wreck, and his charge nurse came up to his office and said, "You have to come down, she's here." And he said, "Who?" His wife. And so he went down, and she telepathically said to him, "Thank you for taking care of him. He's not done yet. We really appreciate what you've done." And for him to have the courage to not be disparaged by his own brethren at the time, to articulate that, as you said, it gives those of us who are looking for license to have permission to let ourselves believe, it kind of helps us make that leap.
That it does. And Bruce Grayson and I this fall are going to be working on a book of physicians who had near-death experiences, and we'll probably have a little afterword about people like Jeff O'Driscoll who had other than near-death experiences, other transpersonal experiences. But we have over 40 physicians either already dead or still alive who had NDEs. And we're hoping that, again, when people read one account after another of a physician whose worldview, in many cases, like Eben Alexander, they're committed materialists, they have this NDE, their worldview is just completely transformed. It's very influential, I think, to be able to read that. So we're hoping that book will, again, make another step toward an inroad to having these experiences acknowledged and their message really be heard and embraced.
Well, and Bruce Grayson's father being a physicist and a scientist, initially he articulates in his books, you know, he was
He was-
averse to that,
that's
right?
right.
So he had to have proof if he was
Yeah.
going to go forward into this area that was clearly seen by some as voodoo and woo-woo and that type of
Yeah.
thing, and you have to fight that. But I think even now more people are more accepting because of the universality of these stories.
Mm-hmm.
And if you could leave us with the quote that you had in our trailer for the television series, well, I'll never forget this, and you said, death is just like walking across the hall, walking from one room into another room.
That's exactly
Could
right.
you amplify on that?
Yeah. Well, I'm actually quoting more than one near-death experiencer who actually said, death is just like walking from this room into the next. And everybody can relate to that experience. That it's nothing, and that's what they're saying. That the transition is effortless. It's natural, and it from that perspective doesn't seem at all unusual.
Right, it's
Yeah.
very commonplace. Well, we appreciate your stewardship and
You bet.
what the organization does, and you guys continue to get the word out and have a wonderful array of speakers. And your website, people can visit the website, people
Yes.
can volunteer, and people can donate, right?
That's exactly right. All that. Yeah. Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Jan.
You bet.